Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Steel Roses podcast. This podcast was created for women by women. Today, I have a really wonderful guest that I am very excited to introduce to you, Urmi Hossain. Urmi is a plethora of things. So I'm just going to run through it because it's just so amazing to me how much you're already working on. So Urmi is a blogger, a YouTuber. You are an author. She's a speaker, a mentor, and she actually is the social media lead for an organization called Women in Leadership that is based in Victoria. So, I mean, you are working on so many wonderful things. I would love for you to just give the audience a little bit more about yourself and the things that are lighting you up right now. Like, what are you passionate about?
Yeah, it'll be my pleasure. So I work actually in the financial sector, so I do have a full-time job, and then I have all these other passions on the side. So I have a YouTube channel, I have a blog, I'm a self-published author. I am part of the Toastmasters Club as a member and VP of Education, and I'm the social media lead for this organization called Women in Leadership. So we are actually based in 7 cities in Canada, and I volunteer for the one for Victoria virtually. So I'm not physically located there, but I still volunteer for that organization. And what we do is we basically promote events that the organization creates for women, based on like having more women in leadership positions. So we create webinars about public speaking, about how to use AI to look for a job. So this is one of the big things that I've been working on right now, and I'm very, very big passionate about it. And we have also a big event coming up in May, which is the Women in Leadership Day, where basically each chapter organizes an in-person event, and they gather like women, and you have like presentation, networking events. And so it's a very cool organization, and that's something that I've been part of. It's been a year actually that I'm being part of it, and it's great.
I think that's so wonderful. So I did look a little bit more into the Women in Leadership organization, and you know, it's so amazing to me that now we have these groups that are bringing women together in such a positive way, and almost like, and I'm going to say non-traditional, because like, before it was like, oh, the only places for women outside of the home, and albeit like I'll go way back, like the only, ways that women were working were really like nurse or like teacher or, nurse or administrative assistant. That's what I've been told, right? Like my family members have told me that, one of my aunts told me that when she graduated from high school, my grandfather told her, like, you have 2 options. You can be a typist or you can be a teacher. And it was like like it's crazy. So it's amazing to me that this is where we are today and that resources are being provided, because there's so many women out there that have all these wonderful talents, and they might just not know exactly where to go for support in like developing those talents. So this is just a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and our platforms are pretty much open to all the women out there from any sort of industry. And we also have a leadership program as well. Like people can actually sign up to this program. It's like an intense program where you get to learn more about leadership. And we also have a mentorship program where the women get paired with a mentor, and they get to learn more from their own experiences. So it's not just giving webinars. We have actual programs. So it's a good thing, because we're providing tools to women, and we're trying to make some changes also in their workplaces. Like if some women who work in a certain company, they want to make a change, we help them to like make that change.
It's very, sometimes it shocks me still, working, because I also have, besides podcasting, I also have my daytime job as well. So but it's still surprising when you've been working for so long in corporate, or you're working so long, out in corporate America or in any industry, and you're still faced with these certain roadblocks that I had I had at one agency, I work for agencies, and there was one agency where I was working and I got to a certain level and it just seemed like no matter what I did, it didn't matter how successful I was with my role at that time, there was not going to be a place for me, beyond a certain role. And it's such a shame. And I've said to people, because my career growth has been pretty aggressive, but it was literally because I had to leave every job in order to progress further on in my career. And it's interesting because I have my son-in-law and I chat sometimes and I give him some career advice here and there. And it's interesting to give advice to a young man coming up in an industry, and he'll tell me like, oh, well, yeah, oh yeah, they promoted me. It's fine. And I'm like, really? And I've told people, I'm like that, I said to somebody once, and it was like kind of shocking for them. I only once was promoted. I've never actually been promoted within an organization. It only happened one time. And it was like really early in my career. And after that, every time I wanted to move up, I had to leave and seek a role someplace else. And it just is very unfortunate because it seems like places are still not recognizing the talent that women have and helping that growth. So it's wonderful that you have a leadership and a mentorship program, because beyond, the leaders in these organizations recognizing women, outside of that, it's also us coming to the table and asking and being aggressive about it, and not even being aggressive about it, just putting it out there and putting it on the table.
Yeah, and that's what the organization does, especially through leadership and mentoring. Like, we tell this women, like, what are some of the ways that you can advocate for yourself at work and how you can get a promotion? Because it's like you said, like, if you want to get a promotion, sometimes it's really hard and you often find yourself quitting and looking elsewhere for like advancement. But we actually teach them how you can do it. And this is also something that I also talk about with some of my mentees. Like, really, you just have to put yourself out there. You have to bring it up. Like, if you don't say, you're not going to get it. Because I also went through the same thing where, like, I wanted to get a promotion. I was not getting promoted. Then I had to, like, make a list and be like, this is why I deserve this promotion. You have to give it to me. Like, and I actually got it afterwards. But I always had to, like, make a case about it.
Yeah. And I think that's where and I know for myself personally, and I want to make sure that like listeners hear this too, because for me, for many, many years, I didn't advocate for myself. And I think that's really a gap that a lot of women have, is that we make the assumption that our work is going to speak for itself. Well, they'll see how hard I'm working. They're going to see that I'm putting in the extra time, and they'll definitely just give me the promotion. But that's really not how it works. And I've had to coach younger folks and younger women and tell them, like, you can't lean on that. You cannot rest on the fact that, like, oh, they'll notice me, because that really is not normally how it happens.
Yeah, it really does not work like that. It's like, if you don't speak, you're not going to get noticed. So I also used to think the same way. I used to think that my work will speak for itself, but it really doesn't. I think you really have to speak up about it. And I think this is probably why some men do it better, because I think they're usually much more vocal and they're a bit more, open about it. Whereas women, we tend to be a little bit more, shy. And then we don't want to come across too aggressive, because then we get like comments and things like that. Although that's not the word I want to use. It's being assertive, actually.
Assertive. Yeah. It's funny you course corrected there, because earlier I said, oh, we have to be aggressive. And I'm like, no, we don't have to be aggressive. We just need to show up. Like, we have to assert ourselves and advocate for ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. So this is what we teach the women in our organization. I basically manage the Instagram account, and in the Instagram account, I usually share all the events that we have coming. We usually have like career coaches, and each chapter organizes a webinar. So we have like people from like different stages of their career. Like, we have people that just entered the industry who share their perspective. We have people that have been working for a very long time in the industry, so they talk about, like, I don't know, career transitions. We talk about public speaking. So we talk about different things. And my job is really to, like, just promote all of this as much as we can, so we can target a lot of, like, as many women as possible.
If somebody is looking to follow the account on Instagram, what is the handle?
It's called, hold on, let me open it because I don't remember on the top of my head.
No worries. And everyone listening, I mean, this is really one of those times where I'm going to encourage you to follow, because this is the kind of information that we do really need to start seeing day in and day out on our feeds. You know, I know that there's a lot of fun stuff online and we all get really entertained with things, but having that messaging reinforced to us is really important. We should be keeping this top of mind.
Yeah, so it's called WIL, WIL underscore Victoria chapter. WIL stands for Women in Leadership. So that's the one from our chapter. But then we have the big main one, which is the actual foundation, which is Women in Leadership Canada, which is a big one that represents all of the chapters.
And listeners, I will have the Instagram accounts linked in the description of this episode. So all you have to do is look down in your phone. You'd be able to follow it from there. Yeah, it is incredibly important, I think, for these resources and these events to happen. And it's so wonderful that I am seeing this more and more now, especially like through podcasting. I've been able to really connect with a lot of women that are really trying to help each other out. I think for forever, and we've been sort of pitted against each other. And there was constantly, I know when I first started working, like when I graduated from college and the first few years that I was working professionally, I had that whole persona of like, you know, resting bitch face, and like, you know, like, and you know, thinking that you had to like step on people to go above everyone else, and you had to take someone down in order to elevate yourself. And it honestly took me a really long time to know, like, well, this really, to start understanding, like, this isn't how we're supposed to be functioning together. Like, we really should be supporting each other professionally, because there shouldn't be a moment where like, oh, I have to take someone else out to get this position. And if you are being put into a position like that, the organization you're working with isn't a great one then, because like, if you're being forced into something like that, then that means that your leadership, their values are skewed, because there should not be a time where you have to do that. And in all honesty, I've noticed much more growth in my own personal career once I started elevating other people.
Let's take a quick break.
Are you interested in podcasting but not sure where to start? My name is Jenny Benitez, and I'm here to help guide you through your podcast launch and maintenance. Check out the link in the episode description for Podcasting Unboxed, your comprehensive startup guide. I am very excited to work with you.
Yeah, exactly. And this is also why I support the cause, women's empowerment. Like, this is very important for me, because I think instead of just fighting against each other, we should just help each other and uplift each other. So that's why I joined this organization, because it's big out there. But I'm also part of like other organizations as well. Like, it's called, one of them is called 100 Women in Finance, and it's based in Canada. And this one is mainly targeting, sorry, it's not based in Canada, it's based in the States. And this one is targeting mainly, basically every single woman who works in the financial sector. And they have all these events that are offered to women who are working in finance, women who are working, I don't know, as asset managers, women working in investment banking, but it's also targeting young talents. We're actually like providing a lot of presentation to young women, even men actually, who want to study and work in finance. So we have like this panel, like discussions with other women in the industry, and we basically tell these young talents like, okay, these are some of the things you need to know when you're working in finance. This is how you can, work your way up through the corporate ladder, things like that. So we also try to educate the next generation, and this is what I like. I think we have to empower women, but we also have to empower the next generation so they can keep going forward.
I really love that. And honestly, I actually was going to ask you because you mentioned early on that you worked in finance. I mean, the field that I'm in is marketing. So it's heavily female dominated up to a certain point. I'm very fortunate right now to be working with female CEOs and female VPs, which is wonderful because it's very few and far between that I get to work with someone at that level that's a woman. So that's been very awesome. But from the finance perspective of that industry, from the finance industry, I know that that's predominantly male, even at all levels. So, I mean, how is that challenging? I mean, on a daily basis, do you see challenges on a regular basis, or is it, few and far between?
No. So I saw the first challenge when I was in university, but I never paid that attention to this. Like I was in, I could go to my finance classes and I would just see like, I don't know, 10 girls and 50 boys. For me, it was like not a big deal. I was like, oh yeah, that's how it is. That's how it is. Like I never thought about it. But then when I started to work, that's when I started to see that. I was like, why are all the managers men? And then when I was like looking for jobs, it was the same thing. Like I would Google them before the interview. I would check the management team, and it was just a lot of men, one woman. And so I would even like bring it up to the interview. I was like, oh, what do you do, to have more diversity? And they would tell me that it wasn't because they were intentionally not choosing women. It was because women were not applying for these jobs. That was the thing. And then I had always a lot of, like, all my managers were mainly men. I always felt like I had very understanding, like, managers. There was a time when I had a woman manager, but I don't know if she was any better, to be honest. Like, you think sometimes they would be because they're like woman to woman, but sometimes I was like, I don't know. I thought it was going to be better, but it didn't feel better. So I was like, okay. And then again, now I have like men managers, and for me, it's like, I used to think this was a challenge. Like sometimes I would not go for a job if I knew that it was just a lot of men working in that company. But I told myself, if I have to bring the change, I have to like keep going forward with these interviews, So I would never like let myself stop. And I was very honest about this. I was like, okay, but what is the diversity? Like you don't have people of color. You don't even have women on your management team. Like this is not working. You're just giving a different image of yourself out to the world. And I would bring it up, and I think it's important to have these conversations because I think it also helps them to see where some of the issues are. And then I still went for these interviews even though I did not take the job. It was just my own personal decision, but it wasn't because of any other reasoning. But I did have situation where some of the managers that I had, they were not very considerate. Like, there was this mentality of some managers working late and they think that, you have nothing else to do in your life, and they assume that it's the same thing for you. So they expect you to stay there until 6 and 7. I had those situations and I had to change afterwards because of that. Because I was like, I don't think this person really understands. Just because the whole team does it doesn't mean I have to do it. I have a life after this.
Right.
So and you have to put the boundaries there. But I think some people don't understand what boundaries are, so they just stick on your boundaries. And there were times where this would happen with me, and I had to really change. I just had to change because I was like, I don't think I can do this on a long term.
So I want to highlight a couple of things. Number one, I have to say congratulations to you and amazing for you, and kudos that you even voiced what you did to interviewers and even internally to say like, well, why aren't there more women in these roles? Like what, and to ask the question and to honestly put people on the spot, because I think, myself included, I always just looked like, all right, well, I don't see any women here, but I'm going to try and get in here. So I wanted to give you kudos for that, because most of us don't even say anything. Most of us just accept it. Like, this is what it is. I'm going to have to just do my best to like make it through this. For female managers versus male managers, I've had this discussion a couple of times, and it is unfortunate. I think it is going to shift though, because I have had some really poor experiences with female managers, but I've also had bad experiences with male managers as well, like not seeing my value and just not wanting to advance me. So I think it can go both ways, but I mean, you're right. Like there was a very long period of time. I've been in my industry for 17 years. There was a really long period where I was like, I don't want to have another female manager. Like it just was too painful, and it was just not worth it. But I think that shift is going to happen because generationally, the people that were part of this whole, like, you have to take each other out to get ahead, they are phasing up to, senior roles, but then also phasing out altogether as more generations come into play. I see it in my day to day. I mean, the past, I want to say 5 or 6 years, there was like a massive shift around like how people were being talked to at offices and how people were being treated and like that sort of thing. Because, I feel like my generation, our generation and younger we are not going to come to an office and expect, someone to just be shouting tasks at us. Like, we're here because like we want a whole full experience. And we also know that we're valued, and we know that we're coming to the table with an expertise. So to me personally, I'm like, treating somebody with respect and valuing people's opinions. Like, if we're hiring you, that means you're a valuable member here. Like, nobody should be treated less than that. Yeah. And then I have this thing that I do, because you had mentioned, like, when you did ask about roles, like when you were interviewing, you're like, oh, there's not a lot of females. And you had inquired about that with the interviewers, and their response was like, oh, women are just not applying to the jobs. But like, I actually read this book by Mita Malik called Reimagine Inclusion. And she talks about it in her book. And a lot of interviews will say that, like, especially for like, bringing in minorities or having just other people, other walks of life working in the industries. And the response, like the canned response, is always like, oh, well, they're not applying to the jobs. And yes and no, because in some instances it could also be like, okay, well, we don't have enough women that have been able to get this education in order to get to this next level here. But then on the flip side, I also know that for some organizations, especially the really large ones, there's like an algorithm that tracks through like resumes, and it's, right. Like, so I think that there's also some issue there in terms of like what is being looked at. Now I know, and I had read that women, will not apply to a job unless they feel like they are 100% qualified. I think that's like a well-known, like we're all aware of this at this point. I think I've mentioned it at least 3 or 4 times on other episodes. Like, in general, I think we have to stop doing that, because men will apply to a job if they're only like 50% or 60%, qualified. And they'll just assume like, well, I'll get the rest of it while I'm on the job. I think a lot of us get in our own way, and we could be reaching for more, but the nervousness of feeling like, well, I'm not going to be able to perfectly execute this. Like, that's okay. You're going to learn it. You're smart enough to get to where you are, and you have all this experience to where you're at. Like, you can get to that next level. You just need a little bit of training.
Yeah. I agree with you on everything that you said. Going back to the first point about me pointing it out to the interviewers, like I'm so, for that specific interview that I have done, I very much appreciated that I was not disqualified after bringing this up. I think they actually liked it that I did, because they did call me afterwards, and they even asked me if I was interested in coming in. Of course I wasn't, because it wasn't what I wanted to do. But I also think here the issue is, it's what you put out there. Because because now I go back to that company and I look up the management team, and I see there has been no changes. What I see is that still a lot of There's still a lot of men in the management team. There's not even a single picture of a woman. I think like you have to do something from that perspective, from the marketing perspective. Like if you want to attract a woman, you have to probably not put on the website who are the people working there, or at least put maybe 2 people or something. You have to change that, I think, because it's what you're portraying to the society, and that's the first thing they see. It's the first impression that you make. And then talking about applying for a job, I do agree with that. I also heard the same thing, which is women often, when they see that they don't match 100% of their qualification, they're not going to apply. But I think it's also in our nature, because we are taught to be perfect since a young age. We are taught to, be excellent at everything, and because of that, I think we just transfer it to other things, to other parts of our life. So yeah, I do think it's an issue that can be solved by both men and women. It's not just this issue that women have to
Agreed.
solve. It's a thing where both genders need to help, basically. Yeah.
Agreed. And I do catch myself, because I think it's going to start everywhere. And it does need to be a whole, everybody kind of making this shift too, because even down to raising my son, my little guy, he's 8. And when I talk with my kids about, like, when I have twin girls and I have a little boy, and so they're very close in age. My son is 8, the girls are 7. Like, it's so when everyone gets reprimanded or I'm teaching them something or whatever it is, like, my husband and I communicate to them like quite a bit. And I am always careful and mindful that, like, the messaging that I'm giving, like, I need to also teach my son, like the stuff that I'm teaching the girls about, like, you can do anything that you put your mind to, and I'm like trying to make sure that the girls have a really strong baseline of, like, I'm okay and I don't have to be perfect and it's okay to make mistakes. And there's all these things that I'm trying to teach them now. And sometimes I forget and I over index on my daughters. And while I need to also teach my son, like, women can do these things, and because he had said to me, he's little, so he kind of was just like, oh, men are stronger than women. Boys are stronger than girls. And I was like, sir. And he made, and it was cute because, he's little and he just made the comment and I was like, okay, wait, hold on. And I had to, and I do talk to him about it because I'm like, I want the kids. And that's really when I think to myself, it's like, my husband and I are really clear communicators with our kids, because they're going to grow up, they're going to go out there into the world. And this is the base, like, this is the baseline education that they're going to go out there. And we need to make sure that you treat people with respect and you honor people. Like, you don't try to tear people down. There was another thought that I had while you were talking too, is there was this other method that I started using about 4 or 5 years ago, because I would get nervous about doing certain things at work. And what I started saying to myself to get me over the nervousness and to kind of push me into doing stuff was, I would literally say to myself, like, well, if I was a man, would I stop? Would I not do this? If I was a man, would I feel uncomfortable here? And I always picture that. I'm like, no, I feel like a man would just go for it. Like, there was a young man that I had worked with many years ago, and he wanted a promotion, and I was going out on maternity leave, and he used my maternity leave as his leverage to get a promotion. And he went into the manager and said, I'm going to leave. And he knew I was going, so he knew that they were going to rely on him. And he was like, I'm looking elsewhere. I have an offer, but if you give me a promotion, I'll stay. And he basically forced them into a promotion for himself. Now, I'm not saying that's a good way to go, but I was like shocked at the audacity that this young man had to just go and do something like that, because I would never do something like that. And stuff like that I've observed, I'm like, wow, I'm like, you really don't have any like sense of like, oh no, maybe I shouldn't, maybe it's too soon, or, like, there was that was the thing that I took away was, man, he didn't even question it. He just went for it and knew that they were going to do it. So I had started saying to myself, if I was a man, would I pause on this? The one time I had to go in and present to my boss why I felt like I needed a promotion and why I deserved one. I was really nervous about it. And that was in my head. I was like, no, Jenny, like you already know you deserve this. Go for it. Ask. You have to advocate for yourself. And if he says no, that's the worst that he's going to do, is he's going to say no. But then you know that he doesn't value you. You can move on from here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of how I approached it, is like, just take that step. And I think that's a lot. And you had said it earlier, we're taught that we have to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
We have to show up a certain way. And it puts a tremendous amount of pressure on all of us. It puts pressure on our daughters, our sisters, like all of us have this crazy amount of pressure to be perfect. And it's okay. I think, we learn the most from our mistakes. So make some mistakes, because that's really what's going to further you much, much more.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I could add further about what you just said about how you're teaching your daughters, but you also have to take into consideration your son. I do think that the solid foundation starts at home, and it starts with what you teach your kids. That's, I think, super, super important. I think the fact I've seen in the past that, there's this ideology, right, that woman is supposed to be in the kitchen and men are not. And this, I've seen it in the South Asian culture a lot. And this keeps going on. And I'm just like, seriously, like, when are we changing this? So I do think that's a change has to start from home. I think that's
absolutely.
And what you have said about the person who got the promotion, I had a similar situation, but it wasn't with the promotion. It was with salary negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, he wasn't a mentor to me. He was just someone that I was having conversation because we have this coffee chat where you're randomly matched with someone. And I spoke to him about how I wanted to have a salary increase, but I was very nervous about it. And he was like, well, what would you tell to another girl who wants to have the same thing? And I said, well, I would tell her to, go ahead, and whatever the outcome is, like, even if it doesn't go well, they're not losing anything. That's what I told him. So I was like, why am I not able to apply this to myself? So sometimes, like, I think we have great tips and advice for other people, but we don't apply them to ourselves. Although we have these amazing tips, like best tips ever. So I try to apply those things to myself, or think about what would I tell to my younger self, So that's another perspective that I take.
It's interesting that you use that as an example. I just had this exact scenario happen to me. I'm in the process of producing a how to podcast guide, and it's going to be launching in April. And for listeners, it'll be released online and on our website and everything. But I was struggling because I started getting myself overwhelmed and stressed out. And I was like, oh, well, this has to look perfect like this. And I was really the guide itself is done. It's been done for a good 2 weeks at this point. And I keep rereading it and being like, oh, maybe I just need to. And last week I cut myself off, and I was like, okay, that's enough. I'm like, it's done. You're all done. You can stop obsessing. It's going to be fine. Whomever is meant to get this guide is going to get the guide. Don't pick it apart any further, because what we do, and what I was about to do to myself, was you end up in this endless cycle of, well, let me revisit it. Maybe I just need to edit this really quickly. And it's with anything we do really as women. It's like, well, let me try to scooch this a little bit. Let me make this a little bit more perfect. Oh, I can't invite anybody over this weekend for the house because I have to clean the house first. Oh, I can't, I can't bring anyone over here because I have to make sure this is perfect. Things don't have to be perfect. And we do need to use our own advice on ourselves, because there have been many times where in the podcast, I've had to really talk myself through it and be like, Jenny, don't be nervous. And I know that it sounds silly, and it might sound silly to the listeners because we're closing on our first year. It's over in April, but I think we're at 60 something episodes, and I've been doing it for this whole time. And it's just, I still have moments where I will start to doubt myself, and I will start to doubt, is this worth it? Is anyone listening? Is anyone getting anything out of this? And then the interesting thing that will happen is somebody will kind of bubble up and come to me and say like, oh, I listened. I really loved this episode. It really helped me. And those little moments help to, reinforce like, okay, this is okay. Like I'm doing this right. Like this is the right path. And I think that us listening to ourselves is really crucial. And there's so much noise out there that it's so hard for, all people, but women to really hear yourself and listen to what your own self is saying, because we really, who knows you better than you?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, and the word that just came to my mind is imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Yeah, that came to my mind right now, and I think in a way I can relate to you to some of the things that you mentioned, because I do create a lot of content as well, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know if it's gonna reach anyone. It's fine, I'm still gonna go on. And then you get that comment saying, oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
And you have someone messaging you on LinkedIn, they're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for your valuable insights. And I'm like, okay, you know what, I think I made a difference in someone's life. So those little things, they make a huge difference in the work that you do. Because like, for instance, at least for me, I like a lot of the things that I do are, if I'm not getting paid by anyone, I just do them because I have passions for them. But they do really pay off when you see them coming back through messages.
Mm-hmm.
They're very, it's like very fulfilling. You're like, okay, I think I'm doing something right here. Yeah.
I said to a fellow podcaster, I have podcast colleagues now, and said to a fellow podcaster, if it's just one episode reaches one woman and helps one woman through something, like that's all I need. An episode that aired recently was around anxiety in women and dealing with anxiety, and because women, I forget what the statistics is, but what the statistics are, but women have the highest level of anxiety. And it's crazy if you really look into it, like the amount of anxiety we carry on our shoulders. And so we did this whole episode on it, and the feedback was astounding. And people were just like coming out of the woodwork, and this episode was really getting listened to all over the place. And I was just like, this is sorely needed, because this is what we're all going through. And it all ties together too, because the anxiety is there for like home life. It's there for work life. Like if you're dating, if you're married, like, there's so much. And it's interesting because like, Urmi, when I was looking through your profile and looking at everything that you do, and I'm like, wow, because even you, like, you have a regular job, but you do all of these things because you're passionate about it. You want to help other women. And I hear you on that on such a deep personal level, because this was something that like I came to realize the year before the podcast launched. I knew I started to have this sense that I was like, I really want to help women. I don't want to, I always say it. And I've always said I wanted to go into advocacy or politics or something where I'd be able to help women. And this podcast has been like one of those mediums that's been able to like really make an impact for people. And just like yourself, like it's just wonderful. Like I love everything you're doing, because you're really, even if it just reaches one person on social and they see it and then they're like, you know what, maybe I do want to attend one of these events. Like, that's such a big deal. It's huge. It could change the course of someone's life.
Yeah, I do agree it can change someone's life. And I had the same experience when I did my first YouTube video. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to talk normally on the screen. I don't care about how perfect it looked or anything. I didn't do any editing. I just uploaded it. Got 10,000 views. And I was like, what? It's just me talking to a camera. Yeah, the first one got 10,000 views.
Wow.
It was crazy. It was crazy. It was crazy. I was like, how?
That's amazing. Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah, we got 10,000 views. And to go back to what you said, there is a quote from Mother Teresa. I think she says, you don't need to feed like 100 people as long as you feed one person or something. Like, it's something along those lines. And I do think like we don't need to make like massive changes. I think it's sort of like a domino effect. I think if you can help one person, then this person can help other people, then this other people can help other people. I think that's how it works. It's sort of like a domino effect.
Like a pay it forward. Yeah.
Yeah, I do like to believe in that. So
yeah, I 100% wholeheartedly agree. So listeners, I'm going to all of the resources that we discussed. I'm going to make sure that everything's linked in the description of the episode so you can have access to everything. Urmi, is there anything you want to leave listeners with before we close out the episode?
We talked a lot about women's empowerment, and I think probably the best advice I can give to any woman is really don't be afraid to speak up for anything that you want, because honestly I don't think there is anything bad that can come out of there. Like if you don't speak, you don't get. That's how I like to see it. And also to be your best advocate. Like there is, like if you know that you're good at it, just go and tell the world that you're good at it, you know, like don't be shy about it. So
yeah, that was perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Listeners, thank you for tuning in. Greatly appreciate you just joining us and following along, over the lifetime of the podcast. I greatly appreciate all of you. If you love this episode, I do ask that you leave a review in whatever platform you're listening to the podcast in. The reviews help to share the content actually with other listeners. So the more you review, the more that you add stars and everything, the more it actually gets promoted to other people. So I greatly appreciate you guys helping me just raise awareness on all of these things that affect all of us. And, really helping us band stronger together as women and just supporting each other. It's an amazing thing. So thank you all for listening. Thank you, Urmi, so much for joining me today. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.